One. All right, and welcome back to the Camera Reads Comics podcast. I have an amazing, ultra super special guest, one of my favorite writers currently working, the best kept secret in comic books, the one, the only, Mark Russell. Hello, Mark. How are you?
Hey, doing good, Cameron.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Even I want to give you guys context into how this happened and how wonderful Mark was. I currently listen to the Word Balloon podcast with John Centris, and Mark was on there talking about his brand new title, Star Squadron. And I was listening to it at work, and my mind was just getting blown with a lot of the points you were making and about your work and your perspective into the industry. And so I tweeted, because I think you should tweet your favorite creators and let them know that they're doing something you like. And Mark was so kind to respond back to my tweet. And then I just shot my shot and said, hey, you're welcome to be on my podcast. And I got a follow. He gave me his email. Thank you so much. Not that you're going to do that with everyone, but I so appreciate your presence here.
Well, hopefully that counts as a tweet the people you're a fan of success story.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd like to encourage that because, as creators, especially as a writer, you work in isolation. It's not like being a singer or a stage performer. You have no idea how anybody's reacting to any of this. So to hear about it on social media is really, really nice. I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's nice for every writer to hear that.
Yeah. And that's because that's what I imagine that the industry is. It's actually, I assume, very isolating. You're working at your computer all day at your desk at home, and days can go by without the presence, and especially right now without as many conventions going on, you don't have that interaction that you would have had. So
yeah, it's one of the things I really like about the conventions, because it is like your chance to sort of interact with people who've read your work. It's like a chance to see that whether or not your work is actually having an impact on anybody. But yeah, without the conventions, without as many of them going on, it's you get less of that. So we're all basically starved for attention right now.
well,
I'm no different.
Let me give you a lot of attention right now, because I'm gonna take all of this in as it's happening. First and foremost, one of the I have a random question. Have you seen the movie Don't Look Up?
Yeah.
Okay, because I have now kind of the way my brain works, I compartmentalize creators and similarities to other creators, and I just feel like you are the Adam McKay of comic books. Do you ever feel that way? Do you get that often?
Well, I'll take that, if only because probably as many people hate me as hate Adam McKay, or probably more.
I love you both, so I'll just say it.
Well, thanks. Yeah, no, I love his work too. I understand it's like kind of polarizing. A lot of people hate it, just as like a lot of people hate mine. But I kind of feel like in a lot of ways, what they really want is subtlety, or they want a satire that doesn't really ask anything of them, that allow, sort of safely. They want like something sort of a Swiftian satire of a bygone age that doesn't really ask them to engage with current events in a way that's painful to do. But to me, that's really, if satire has any social purpose, that's what it is there to do. It's not to be some safe poking fun at some abstract folly that we all share. It's about things that actually we could change if only we had the will to do so. And I think that's kind of what's polarizing about him and probably myself. But I accept that, because I think that the stakes are high enough with the world where it is now that we don't really have the luxury of subtlety anymore. We've got to talk about the things that are important right now, and talk about them in a way that's maybe a little heavy-handed, a way that's going to, like, sort of wake people up a little bit. When I was watching, I'm not the only one who's made this comparison, but when I was watching Don't Look Up, I kept thinking this is like our generation's Dr. Strangelove. And I when I was in London a couple of years ago, they had like a Stanley Kubrick exhibit, and he had like the special exhibit for each one of his movies, and there's one for Dr. Strangelove. And sure enough, in that exhibit, there were like angry letters people sent in saying, this is like anti-American, or I love a good satire as much as the next person, but this is too close to home. We all live with the threat of nuclear war every day. How could you possibly joke about this? That's kind of what I feel like satire, if it is not just to be joke telling, that's what it really is there to do, is to wake you up to the fact that not only we live under a specter of nuclear war or disinformation, but that we could do something about it, and that we probably need to do something about it if we're not going to ride the missile all the way down to the earth.
Yeah, and I think that one of the themes that I've noticed, because I'm halfway through right now, issue 3 of Superman versus Imperious Lex, your future state 3-issue arc. I was reading that, and I just watched that movie, and I'd already made kind of some of those comparisons in my head to you and McKay, and I was like, oh man, I watched Don't Look Up, and the critique of that movie on capitalism and the government structure, and then a very similar critique that you made within your versus Imperious Lex with the arc. And I don't want to go too far into spoilers because it's still fairly, it came out this year with X-99. I thought with the robot X-99 kind of falling in love with this creator, and this entire arc of this last kind of beat for that character was, I'm falling in love with a creator who's betraying me.
Right. And it's death by loyalty, which I think, is kind of like what, is based a lot upon what I saw from the people who were ride or die Trump supporters, even to the point that they were arrested for him without him really caring about it, or, that they ruined their careers following a guy who did not care in the least about them.
After you and I had interacted on Twitter, I also noticed that similar kind of theme in your one shot of Lex Luthor but Lex Luthor Porky Pig story, because after I saw what you had done in Exit Stage Left, the Snagglepuss Chronicles, and like the potential for these stories, because that one was, Snagglepuss was definitely one that I had to like sit in silence for a while after that, because that story had no right being as good as it was, which maybe is an unfair precedent. And I'm kind of like eliminating that precedent now, because how seriously we take these stories and their satirical nature is so impressive. But that's how I saw that. So that's what made me pick up the Lex Luthor Porky Pig, and kind of this similar arc of loyalty to they're walking themselves to their own grave. Is that something that a narrative you want to keep propelling, or what fascinates you about that?
Well, I think it's just what I'm feeling is going on at the moment. It's not like I write something thinking, oh, this will change everything, or oh, this is what I want to, this is what, people need to hear. It's just more kind of like, this is what is weighing on me. These are the themes that are currently obsessing me, because this is what I think is going on. And how do I put this in a metaphor that will work as a story? It's not so much about the impact I think this is going to have on other people as it is what me is trying to exercise these own sort of thoughts and fears that I have.
And so that's so interesting. And like on the Word Balloon podcast, it makes me to bring up another point that you made. What really keeps drawing me to your work is a point that you made on that interview, which was talking about the stakes within the storytelling. And you kind of you felt like the stakes were too broad. And I think you've really found a way to like hone it in, especially right now and what you're doing with Star Squadron, where it's like you want to talk, you're writing stories about heroes that are trying to help people find housing. You're like, Red Tornado is trying to help Gangbuster. It's issue number 1, guys. It's not a spoiler for the series. He's trying to help him find an apartment. What made you want to tell that type of story as opposed to, Earth is about to explode kind of stakes?
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with those stories. I tell those stories too, but yeah, I think that a lot of times in superhero comics, you lose track of the scale of like the problems that most of us deal with. And I think in a lot of ways we resort to like the Earth is going to explode, or there's this league of aliens that are going to enslave us all if we don't band together. I think we do that as a way of avoiding the real issues that we are, confronting here on Earth. And so I want sometimes to write about the real issues that people do need a hero for, because the having super strength, being able to fly, being able to punch somebody through a plate glass window are very limited skills. There's not a lot of situations where those are very useful. But if you could find somebody like an apartment that they can afford, that's a skill that's, you know, going to do an enormous amount of good. In fact, there's a point at some point in the series where Red Tornado kind of makes this, you know, observation that like just going around and helping people randomly as probably save more lives than, you know, his best day as like a hero on the job.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of heroism that's all too often ignored because we want to see a fight, we want to see somebody get drop kicked into a volcano, which is much more interesting than watching somebody sign a lease. But ultimately, if you're talking about what would really change the world and what would really, you know, make an impact on people's lives, it's the boring stuff.
Mhm. I think you're totally right. And there's a, I don't know how, and this is the thing again why I'm so drawn to you. I don't know how you make something like that, because frankly, when I'm reading those stories that you're putting out, best example is the court scene in Snagglepuss. When I'm reading that and the narrative is just climaxing and it's the most compelling, like I couldn't put the book down kind of thing. And it's his, he's in a court, it's in a courthouse, you know, telling off these officials that are making terrible choices. But you made that just as compelling as, for off the top of my head, you know, Kingdom Come. I was like, how are the stakes? How are these stakes so high? And how is something like that so compelling? In the same way that you have my trust now when you are writing something like One Star Squadron, where I'm like, I believe that you have the narrative potential and the understanding of the scope of the story to make that as that moment as compelling. So,
Well, I think the stakes are only as high as they are for the character. So a story about somebody, you know, taking an apple crisp to their mother on Mother's Day could be as, you know, life and death as a story about, you know, someone saving the world from a comet, if that's what it represents to that character. If that character is like, I haven't seen my mother in 10 years. You know, we had a fight last time we saw each other. I don't know if she still loves me. So I'm going to take her this apple crisp and try to me, that's just as compelling
yeah,
as, you know, some star chamber trying to save the planet from aliens.
yeah, and it is almost like flip this entire the. It's funny because like I feel like within storytelling that that is a traditional story, but it's not what we see in this medium, which is what's so like it makes it compelling in a new way where it's like I just am so impressed by it. And like that's my favorite part about everything you're doing. It's just because you are making the day-to-day, and for if you don't see, I'm air quoting the mundane stuff, uh you're making it worthwhile, because that's what life is anyways. And so I love that.
Yeah. Well, and part of it too is that, you know, I was kind of approaching the heroes sort of like as I would approach professional athletes, where we hear about the stars. The stars, you know, are famous and they live these great lives. But for everyone who makes it to the NFL or to the NBA, there's 1,000 other people who wanted to do that, who flamed out at some point.
Mhm.
And it's worthwhile to take a look at all the lives that didn't make it to that level of stardom, the true cost of what it is to try to like be somebody that everyone looks up to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that going back to, I don't know if we said this since we started recording, but I was telling Mark earlier that I just love that he is taking the B and C characters of the DC universe, and like, if you give them the attention, they can become the A-list characters. Batman has so many arcs, and like a lot of them are really great. And that's why he has such a legacy. But if people gave Red Tornado, if people gave Power Girl, those kinds of that kind of attention, we could have that investment. We could have like really wonderful legacies of those characters.
Yeah.
And I just appreciate that you are the one giving them those legacies and that attention, because that personal touch is what's going to make them more in tune with the readers and the audience. Do you feel that way?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of advantages to writing a character that's got like a lot of social equity, like Batman or Superman, and that people who normally wouldn't read a story about what you're writing will read it because Batman's involved or Superman's involved. But by the same token, what you lose is you lose a lot of the freedom to tell the kinds of stories you maybe want to tell that aren't, you know, about guys just getting punched into oblivion. And so what's liberating about telling a story about the B-listers and the C-listers is that it broadens the you know the range of stories you can tell. No one's going to complain if I do a story about, you know, Red Tornado performing at birthday parties, or Minuteman getting kicked out of a Comic-Con. No one's going to care about me taking those heroes on that kind of journey. So what I lose in the social equity and being able to draw people in just because of the name of the character, I feel like I gain in terms of the freedom of what kind of stories I can tell.
Absolutely. And the amount of overreach, like you can tell the story that you would like to tell with those characters without too much limitation from external forces, which is so valuable in itself.
Well, I think that's one of the advantages of working in comics itself as a medium, is that if you're working in like TV or movies or some other visual medium, usually, you have to convince a producer to sink a bunch of money into it, millions of dollars. Usually you have to convince focus groups that the ending was good. And, in comics, you don't have all of those pressures. I mean, you do have to convince an editor to take a chance on you, but beyond that, you're free to kind of like play with the house's money a little bit. And so I'm amazed that people aren't using this medium to tell, more daring stories, tell stories that they wouldn't see in like a 30-minute TV show or hour or 2-hour movie.
I think you're 100% right. And do you feel that in any sort of way that the industry is like kind of paying more attention to the medium of comics, or do you think it's the opposite? Because I feel like we're in this era where every single comic in the world is just getting adapted. Do you feel like people are now like not going into comics for the wrong reasons, but I mean, with what you're saying, the potential for the medium, do you think people are paying more attention to it now?
Oh, they're definitely paying more attention, but the problem is the kind of attention they're paying is one of like, well, here's a gold mine that we could strip mine. Here's something we can squeeze some profit out and make some like less interesting TV shows and movies. They're using it as like an IP farm where they can just sort of like look and pick and choose what sort of individual ideas they can take and make into like a beast that bears no resemblance to what it's intended to look like, and sometimes with very good results. I mean, the MCU didn't become like the biggest thing in the world because it sucks. They do very good job with it, but I think that in a lot of ways it's sort of defanged a lot of the stories that are in comics, and I think that I would like to see more adaptations in TV and Hollywood, sort of not just like take ideas and characters from the comics, but to take the spirit of those comics too.
Yeah, I think that again, I told you before we recorded, I'm just going to like gush to you about how much I love your work, but I think that that's something that you nailed down really well with a lot of the satirical nature of your work and the harsh mirror that's shown to society. It's a knife walk, because it's not going to settle well with everyone, but the fact that you are still able to capture the spirit of Superman in something like the Lex Luthor story or Imperious Lex, I'm so impressed by, because you can be cynical. It's very easy to be cynical, but the spirit of Superman is that of hope. And the fact that you walk that line, how do you, is that the biggest challenge, do you think, of how you do it? Or is there, what are the other
that's
challenges?
probably the single biggest reason why I like writing Superman. That's the biggest thing that draws me to him, is because I think his real superpower isn't like the ability to fly or super strength. His real superpower is the ability to look at everything going on in the world and somehow not go crazy, somehow like keep his head on straight and still have hope and optimism and still believe in the human race, even though it fails time and time again to justify that hope. And to me, that's what makes him so fascinating. And part of it is, I think, as a character, he's so powerful that he has to do that, because otherwise he would just be a terror. He would just, it's like if you go into a house and they have chihuahuas, the chihuahuas can yap and nip at you all they want. You're not too, scared of it. But if they got a Great Dane, the Great Dane barks once, you're terrified. Superman would be that Great Dane. He's got to be absolutely the best dog you ever had, because he barks at somebody once, they're never coming back.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, I 100% agree. And there's like a gentleness there that we almost see again, like in All-Star Superman. I think I've had a lot of talks with my local comic shop, about like, he always talks about Superman could be ultra powerful, but instead, if you were that powerful, you would kind of just be hanging out on a cloud, like the cover of issue #1 for All-Star Superman.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go. I was going to go work by work, and we've touched on some of them, but I'm wearing my Fantastic Four sweatshirt right now. I recently got it from Kohl's. It's my new favorite sweatshirt, but I want to talk to you about Fantastic Four Life Story. I wasn't able to get my hands on issue #6, so I got to go to my local shop for that. So I'm at issue 5 right now, at the end of issue 5. I would love to talk about your run on there. First and foremost, how long have you been a Fantastic Four fan, if at all, if forever?
Yeah, it's one of the few comics that I actually read as a kid occasionally, because most of the comic, I was more of a Mad Magazine guy than a superhero guy as a kid.
That checks out.
Yeah, but for some reason I was drawn to the Fantastic Four when I saw them in the spinner rack, which gives you some idea how old I am. That was the one I sort of gravitated to. And I think I gravitated because of Ben Grimm, because the thing on the cover, it's like, how could you pass up that guy?
My heart.
And he's a lot of times it's like saying something funny or something on the cover is like, oh my God, it's this rock dude. And he's like, dropping sick burns and stuff. And so that's what kind of got, and I didn't read religiously. I wasn't like a monthly reader, but I was an opportunistic reader. And I think in a lot of ways, what I really love about it is because the characterization is so strong. They all want such different things, and yet they somehow work together when they do work together. But to me, that's what really is sort of the secret sauce of the Fantastic Four, that these people want very different things from life. And they have to somehow find it together.
I think that's what makes them such a powerful family, because isn't that such a true personal familial dynamic, is that, they also, I think one of the things they do want, at least from my opinion, is to be able to work together and coexist. And so against those odds of them having different, internal wants, the external need to work together and be a family and achieve both. So I guess my question would be about that story is, did you have a favorite character narrated issue in that series that you wrote, or the one you were most looking forward to?
Well, I think my favorite issue is issue #5, but I think my favorite narrator is probably Ben in #4, just because it was cool to be able to write a whole issue sort of in his voice, and also to talk about his emotions, to talk about his sort of interior thoughts, as opposed to just him saying it's clobbering time, dropping one-liners on people.
I think that he is Ben Grimm. It's weird because I think Daredevil is my favorite character just in the comic medium, but I think within the Marvel universe, my favorite character is Ben Grimm, because he is the heart of the Marvel universe. It's the guy with the rough exterior, but with the ultimate heart of gold. And I think there's kind of some similarity to what you're saying about Superman and what you're saying about Ben Grimm with the Great Dane example, where he's so loyal to Reed to the point where, loyalty till death almost of his exterior, but he is the biggest heart of gold and just is this glue to this Marvel universe in such a unique way, and even to the Fantastic Four. I was also wondering, for my sake, what do you think is a mandatory Fantastic Four run? Because I've recently fallen in love with that family, but what do you think is the essential readings?
I think the run in the 50s, not the 1950s, but the issues 50s, the Stanley Jack Kirby, that's kind of like what and I think that was like early 70s, late 60s. But when I read that, I was just kind of like sold, like these characters are awesome. In fact, the first issue of my life story, I based entirely around, I think it was issue 51, where a scientist finds a way to turn the thing back into Ben Grimm permanently. And it's sort of the ultimate, like, sort of last temptation of Christ moment for the Fantastic Four. And to me, it was just so like heartbreaking, because Ben fails the test. He takes him up on the offer, but then he doesn't end up getting what he was promised. Sort of like you made a deal with the devil, but then you wake up the next morning and the mansion he promised you is like turned to dust. You're back on the street. So I think to me that still stands out as my favorite run. There's been all kinds of crazy good runs since then.
I also want to give you mad credit for how you wrote. Well, how you wrote that entire series, because I didn't think Spider-Man life story could be topped. Because I told you earlier, you're one of the writers where I'll just pick up everything that you're writing based on your name being on the title. Doesn't even matter the character. Chip Zdarsky is similarly that with me, and so what you did with each individual character was wonderful, but I'd love to break it down too with how you treated Sue Storm. I think she is one of the most valuable, most powerful characters in the Marvel universe, but I think she's a tough character to write. What gave you the posture for her empowerment and her arc with Namor? How did you come to those conclusions? Was that how you always visualized the character, or how
Well, a
was
lot
that?
of it, comes out of her and Reed wanting very different things. They love each other, I think, deeply, but they wanted very different things. Reed, of course, wants to save the world primarily, from Galactus, who in my series is coming largely as a result of his sort of psychic interface with Reed. So Reed feels personally responsible for the fact that the world is about to be destroyed by Galactus, and he feels like this is like the one thing that trumps everything else that everybody should be working on, getting ready for Galactus. And Sue wants, on the other hand, to change the world. She's like sees how like women are treated as second class citizens, how she is treated as a second class citizen in her own home, and about how the '70s issue which she narrates, which is that decade, was really about like a lot of people saying we're demanding to be treated like human beings. Former third world countries who were emerging out of the shadow of colonialism in Africa and South America suddenly demanding to be respected and demanding to be seen as equals in like the United Nations and elsewhere. I think so. She was very much of that time, and I think that's kind of like the source of the conflict between her and Reed, and that Reed wants to save the world from this more abstract threat, whereas she wants to make the world now a world worth saving.
I think the way that you talk about and you convey in that story, their dichotomy is so beautiful, because she, I think that's kind of the way I read them. I think that's the way kind of their relationship really is in general. Anyways, I think she's very much more, number one, socially aware of the interpersonal going on within the world she sees around her, and Reed is focused on the abstract and the bigger ideas, and that's always their disconnect. But again, like you said, uh, they're drawn together and they love each other deeply. Did you find it to be a big hurdle, the 6 issue limit? Because I remember Zdarsky in interviews would say that he wanted it to be like a 12 issue series or like longer, because the Spider-Man is obviously so a well, and to squeeze all of that
Oh, yeah.
into those issues. Did you feel that with the Fantastic Four?
Well, I realized that trying to squeeze like the Fantastic Four canon into like 6 issues of 30 pages each was not going to happen. So I didn't even really try. I just tried to tell a cohesive story of my own about the Fantastic Four that went over the span of like 6 decades. So I actually kind of like the 6 issue format where each issue is a different decade. But yeah, there were times where it was really hard because I was having to like take pages out that I really liked or that could have fleshed out the story more because the arbitrary 30-page limit. I think what I would have preferred to have had was like 6 issues of 40 pages each.
Oh yeah, and I would have bought those as well. It's great. Um, is there is there any, actually I want to go back to, we didn't talk about Johnny. I want to talk about Johnny. I think the Fantastic Four is a tough team to write in general, because Kirby and Stanley did it so well. And then also I recently read the Mark Waid, Mike Ringo run,
Oh
and
yeah, that's another
it is
great run.
that blew my mind. I'm Hickman has kind of been out of print, but anyways, I'm gonna pick that up, read that. But I think that Johnny is another character too. He's incredibly tough to make likable. So how, when you approach that, I think that the way that you made, because I don't think I've ever read something the way you you kind of made it the way Franklin sees Johnny in that run, and how that was, how that was handled in the entire arc of Johnny. I was just in love with. How was your approach to writing him? Was he a challenge to write, or was he just like came naturally?
Yeah, he's sort of a challenge, right? Because he's sort of out on his own island. He's not married to one of the other characters, like Reed and Siwar, and he doesn't have like the sort of like cachet, he doesn't have the visual different distinction that
Yeah.
like Ben Grimm has. But to me, the essential story of Johnny Storm is like one who sort of gets locked in this sort of teenage mentality because that's when he becomes famous. And so to me, the story about him is like, how does he grow up? How does he learn to think about something bigger than himself? And that's kind of what his arc is about somebody who became like as big as the Beatles when he was like 16 years old. And how do you mature after that? How do you find something to care about beyond your own fame? And that's really, I think, the big challenge to people who, have everything handed to them at a very early age. And that's kind of what I wanted to explore with him.
Yeah, and I have to tell you that that issue is my absolute favorite issue because of, again, I think what you're talking about, you gave us a side to him because I don't think comic books are kind of, especially the Fantastic Four, the eternal second act. We can't quite ever see how their narratives are going to end, but or even with the structure like the life story does, you can kind of see those characters grow over time. And I think the way that you were able to give us the window into Johnny growing over time was amazing. And so it was a side to him I'd never seen before. And especially having Franklin there and carry that torch was wonderful. Okay, I think we're running out of time. I'd love to talk now about Exit Stage Left, the Snagglepuss Chronicles, the story that turned me on to your writing style. I was on a plane trip. I used to go to school in the Midwest. I went to University of Northern Iowa. So I'd fly back from my home in California to Iowa all the time. And so on those plane trips, I'd read, Marvel Unlimited, DC Universe Infinite, all the apps. And I remember about to go on my 3-hour flight, and I was like, okay, let me go. I hear this Snagglepuss story is really good because people were raving about it on Twitter and online. I hear this is really good. Let me go check it out, because Tom King's Batman Elmer Fudd was another story that just completely caught me off guard. Just no right being as good as it was. I was like, I'll go try this. And let me tell you, the first time I read it, I think I've read it three times now. I was reading it and I was like, this plane cannot land. I just need to. I was like, issue one. I was like, okay, that's pretty good. Let me go check out issue two. Issue two. By issue three, I was like, this plane does not stop until I'm done with this story. And then afterwards, I was like, I wasn't even familiar with, the Hanna-Barbera properties. And Snagglepuss in particular, I was just so floored by, because there's so many jokes about the only character in that story that I was familiar with was a Huckleberry Hound, which is obviously not the Huckleberry Hound I knew.
No. Yeah, for those reading the comic first, that's not what you'll find when you go watch a Huckleberry Hound.
Exactly. I guess simply, and I'm sure you've done interviews about this story. Fundamentally, I just am wondering what I guess, was it something about those characters? Was that just a story you wanted to write, and then you got the opportunity with those characters? How did these pieces come together for you?
Well, when I'm writing something like that, what I like to do is think about what is it that's important about this character? What is it that means something to me? What is it that I find interesting? And I just build the story around that. And for me, the things I found interesting about Snagglepuss was the one that he's like a gay icon.
Is he? I just didn't even know that.
Yeah, and he has this sort of transcendent fame beyond the cartoons of the late 50s, 60s, as a gay icon. And also he's obviously got a theater background, because his two catchphrases, "Exit Stage Left" and "Heavens to Murgatroyd" are both theater references. And then when I was researching him, by which I mean reading his Wikipedia article, I discovered that when he was originally aired in 1959, he was called Snaggletooth and he was orange. So I thought, well, that's interesting. Why would they change him? And so that's what kind of like gave me the idea for the storyline. It really, the whole storyline came out like, why would he have left the theater? What made him a gay icon? And why did he have to change his name once he was in the cartoon? So based upon these three things in real life, I was sort of able to sort of compose the whole story, especially when I was thinking, well, this is what's going on in the 1950s before he comes on the TV during his career
Oh
in
my
theater.
gosh.
What was going on in the 1950s in America that might cause him to like have to change careers, and so the whole story just sort of, based upon these few sort of bits of information about Snagglepuss, the character in as he exists in the Hanna-Barbera world, allowed me to sort of weave this new story for him.
Was it then? Did the pieces fall into place easy for you? Or was that like, because just as I feel like as loud as that book came out of the gates, it's so compelling because, sometimes I will be fortunate enough to talk to creators and they'll say, oh no, like I asked a question at a panel to Mark Waid about Kingdom Come. And I was like, do these characters write themselves? Because sometimes it just seems so fluid. I feel like Snagglepuss, like I would have never pictured anyone like that. And so did it come easily or not? Was it a major
No,
challenge?
writing for me, I think generally doesn't come very easily. It's always kind of, I think for me, writing is really rewriting. That's where the magic happens. What I usually come up with is kind of one dimensional and kind of sucks. But then as I work at it, as I think about what mistakes I've made and what it is I'm trying to say that's not coming through on the page, it begins to get better. And that's really, I think, when you're in the second or third, rewrite, that it really starts to take shape.
That's awesome. And it's awesome to hear that, I think people can be critical of themselves. And also, that it's, I feel like what I'm hearing from you is a love of the process, or at least an appreciation for the process. And I feel like the best stuff comes out when you're just willing to put the work in. Is that kind
Yeah.
of?
For me, and I realize other writers and artists might be different, but for me, the process is really where the magic is. It's where, the first thought I usually have is usually the most boring. And it's not until I allow my slow brain to sort of take over and like go to bed thinking about a character, or, I'm in the shower thinking about like a problem in the story, or not thinking about it, just sort of like showering. And then all of a sudden an idea will come to me out of the blue. But it's not until you've actually sort of struggled with it for a while that you begin to have ideas that not everybody else would have, that the ideas that are unique to you as a writer begin to emerge. Because when you're just putting things down on paper, you're thinking quickly, and that's when you're kind of reacting the way anybody would react. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, somebody throws a pillow at them, they duck. Somebody, they lose their job, so they, go to like the unemployment line. You think of like these very sort of linear solutions. Whereas when you start struggling with what you've already written about how it doesn't work, or doesn't, it doesn't feel like it's true to the character, that's when you start to come up with the things that are unique to that character and unique to you as a writer.
That's awesome. Okay, let's talk One Star Squadron. I'm sure you've had an abundance of conversation about this book in particular. I guess what I'd love to know is, because they're B-list characters, and because I think there's a lot more exploration that you need to do with those. I think there's a lot more research you need to do as opposed to the flagship, even with someone like the Fantastic Four. Is there anything, as you're exploring these characters, is there any factor or trait or character that surprised you as you were writing them? Is there anything that, wow, caught you off guard, maybe in how they would respond to something, or like their nature?
Yeah, I think the one thing that really kind of surprised me was about how much fun I had writing the Heckler. I knew I wanted the Heckler in there to be sort of like the comedic relief, that kind of like
Mhm.
drop one-liners on people. But I didn't realize how important he was going to be to me, even though he's like not really a huge character in the story. I put him in wherever I could just because he was so much fun to write.
Yeah, I loved his scene. Can you mentioned something too on the Word Balloon podcast about the longing? What surprised me the most was the longing that you put of Red Tornado in his pursuit for humanity. And that was something that would just knock my socks off, because of course, and I think that's kind of an arc about that character that has been lost, because I haven't read the Brad Meltzer Justice League, not
Mhm.
a lot of it, Tornado's Path and Lightning Saga and stuff like that, but not the whole run. He I just think that that character was like so bolstered up, and I think he is like one of the top tier DC characters, or at least B list. And I think he should have a lot more appearances than he's currently having. Um, but how he found his way to your book, I thought was so cool. What made you want to bring that character in?
Well, it started with the fact that he just has a really cool look.
Yeah,
I thought this guy will just look great in a completely, generic office setting. This guy, is like a red android with an arrow on his head and a cape. I thought, how cool would that look? But really, as I got deeper into the writing, it was more about the fact that he's an android who's trying to function in the human world. And, it said that nobody sees us clearer than outsiders because they see us for, the we get so used to what we're doing on a daily basis, we become blind to it. We're like fish swimming in water, doesn't don't realize that water exists. So
yeah.
sometimes it takes someone from the outside to look at us and say, why are you swimming in water? And I think that that's kind of what, in a lot of ways, Red Tornado, the role he plays in the story, is that because he's an android trying to learn how to be human himself, he could see how wrong humans are get it more clearly than we can.
I think what it reminds me of this moment from Jeff Loeb and Ed McGuinness, I believe's World's Finest Batman Superman run, where Clark and Bruce are narrating how one another fights, and Bruce says, well, Clark's like number one goal is to be like the most human, but what he doesn't realize is that's going to be what makes him more human than any of us. And I see that in Red Tornado, where it's like his pursuit of humanity is actually, he makes him so vulnerable and so much more human than like a lot of the rest of the members of that team. Because I forget who it was in the first issue who has a 1-star rating on the Heroes for You app, or on the
Yeah,
app that
that's
they have.
the Minuteman.
Minuteman has a less rating, and because he wants to be seen as Superman or Batman. But Red Tornado is like, oh, who is he talking to? Oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. I shouldn't be able to cite this.
What scene are you talking about?
Okay, Minuteman is talking about having a 1-star review, and he wants to be on like bigger budget gigs.
Right.
And
Yeah, he's talking to Red Tornado because Red Tornado's the manager of the office. And so Red Tornado's trying to get him to like, turn the ship around just by taking some like easy gigs and
yeah,
building up his rating. Whereas Minuteman lives in terror of just like not being able to be a hero anymore because he's used to like a different level of stardom because he had a movie made about him, you know, 20 in the 90s or early 2000s. He had a movie made about him, but he's trying to hold on to a dream that's quickly evaporating. He's like somebody who's like sell by date is long gone, and he's still trying to hold on to that while Red Tornado's trying to basically help him survive as an employee of the All-Star, or as an employee of Heroes for You.
yeah. I loved that interaction, and his Red Tornado's willingness to try and help Minuteman understand, I thought was so unique. And it's just like, you're so right. And the what you're doing in that story with how you're describing NBA players, I just adore and I love. And
He's one of those guys who's like 16th man. Yeah, he's not ready to give up the dream yet, but he is never going to like see the floor in another game probably ever.
I love that. I think your intention with that was supposed to be our man, but editorial wouldn't let you use him.
That's right. They said he's off limits, I think, because he was about to like get a show or appear on a show on the CW or something. So I just made it Minuteman, which in a way is, I think, a kind of a cooler name because it's got some historical reference.
Yeah,
and also more pathetic because his powers only last 1 minute.
exactly. I adore that too, because that's, would you ever actually consider writing the JSA? Would that ever be something you took on? I'm just
Sure.
guessing.
Yeah, I would do a JSA run.
I'm thinking about, I'm
Still
reading The Golden Age right now by James Robinson. And I think that story is really unique. And the notes of it remind me of you. I think there's a Robinson-esque tone to your writing, or realism. And now that you're talking about these heroes, and those are just, I think they're now pumping them up to A-list characters, but which they should be. But those characters, I could see your tone with that generation would be so interesting. Can I pitch to you the one character I want you to write more than anyone, though?
Sure, why not?
After Imperious Lex, it's making a huge impression on me. Um, Lois Lane. I would love for you to have a Daily Planet Lois Lane like esque kind of similar to what Greg Rucka recently did with the character, but giving you an ongoing title for Lois. I think the way that you wrote her and the power that you could give that character is so wonderful. So I just want to.
I actually pitched a Lois Lane series a long time ago, but it was kind of about like her life as a journalist, and it was sort of commingled with actual like pages of prose from her articles that she was writing. But it was at the very same time that they had just offered Greg Rucka his own Lois Lane title, so it didn't go anywhere.
I'm under the school of belief that I think several characters that you would now have written, The Thing and Lois Lane, should always have their own ongoing series. And sorry, we're bounced around a lot, but going back to One Star Squadron, your collaboration with Steve Lieber, what was that conversation like? I guess igniting the series or getting together, because I think that is a match made in heaven for tonally what you're trying to accomplish. I think when I think about that team, that was when I was like, oh, absolutely. How excited were you to collaborate? What were those conversations like?
Very excited. I've been a huge fan of Steve's since I read The Fix, and I thought, this is a guy I've long wanted to work with, and I sort of knew him because he lives here in Portland, so we would hang out at comic related events.
That's awesome.
And stuff. So yeah, it was kind of a dream of mine to work with him, but especially after like Jimmy Olsen blew up, I kind of figured that, well, that's never going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But then when we were talking about One Star Squadron with the editorial team, they're like, well, what about Steve Lieber? I was like, if you could get me Steve Lieber, do whatever it takes to get me Steve Lieber. I would love to work with Steve. And yeah, and he was really into it. Like, he could have done a lot of other projects, but he chose One Star Squadron, for which I have to thank him for all eternity, because I can't believe he chose One Star Squadron over some of the things he was being offered at the time, because he was such a huge success.
He is. I just think that tonal match, it's lightning in a bottle, you guys together on that title, because I think what he did with Jimmy Olsen, and that was like one of my favorite titles, that generation of Superman, where it was like Lois Lane, Jimmy Olsen, Superman all together. I was like, oh, like and subscribe all the way. It's just
I will work on anything with Steve Lieber or Steve Pugh. I did Wonder Twins with Stephen Byrne. I guess what I'm saying is, like, work with the Steve, or at least Steve's have been very good to me.
That's so good to hear. You deserve it. Yeah. So I love that title, One Star Squadron. It's like, I'm just so excited. That's going to be my new favorite book monthly, which is problematic because I have already so many books I'm looking forward to monthly. Okay. Last question. What is the favorite book in your pull list? Do you even have time to read books right now?
Yeah, I do. I make a point of reading comics. One, because I work in comics, and two, there's just so many great things coming out right now.
I think so.
Yeah, I will, like, the things I will get the moment they come out are, well, right now I'm really loving, this is like Tom King's like Supergirl series.
Oh, really?
It's like probably the first thing I read when it comes out. But beyond that, I love Ice Cream Man. I love Made in Korea. Loved Fight Girls, which I thought was fun. It was kind of ridiculous and violent, but I loved it. But yeah, there's just so many things. Like, there's so many great writers and artists and titles from right now. It's like it's hard to go wrong if you there's at least like a dozen people you should just be reading based upon their name, I think, right now.
Yeah, the pull list is getting really expensive right now, and especially like, I think what they got going personally on the Bat family side of things, I'm just like, Josh Williamson blew my mind.
Yeah, I'll read pretty much any title that Ed Brubaker comes out with, like same day, pretty much.
I was going to ask you, because I just finished reading The Fade Out, and I thought
that's my favorite thing I think he's ever written, is The Fade Out.
Thank you so much. Okay, that's top two. Now just want to gush about Ed Brubaker. The first criminal book I ever read was My Heroes Have Always Been Junkies. And I think that is just on par with Snagglepuss. I think that is medium redefining, but then also I just read The Fade Out, and that might be my brand new ultimate favorite, if not only for him, but it was everything going on in that book. The art, I thought Sean Phillips just went off. Masterclass in the medium, and Elizabeth Brightwater's colors were insane.
It's as close to a perfect comic as I think you're ever going to find, because it pops on an artistic level and it works as like a crime book and also historical fiction. It's just, it's unassailably great, I think.
I was hoping that you would. I'm not. You read my mind going into mentioning Ed Brubaker, because that's one title again. Like, I always pick up The Criminal because him and Sean Phillips are killing it. Would you ever do, or have you done a crime noir, like a true crime noir like that?
I would love to do a crime noir. I don't know if I would do it like that, because there's no need for like a second rate in Brubaker. But I would do I would do a first rate Mark Russell crime comic book.
And I would pick it up. Oh my goodness. Do you have a dream collaborator for something like that?
Man, it's hard for me to conceive of someone doing a crime comic book that doesn't at least have some sort of resemblance to Sean Phillips' art, because it works in such a of gritty way. But I'll tell you one person who I think would be, who I've always wanted to work with.
Yeah.
And I think would be Marguerite Sauvage, because I think she does a really excellent job of like sort of showing people in historic periods of dress, and has like just a really clear sort of visual style that I think she would be excellent in whatever genre you put her in.
Oh yeah. I believe it. Well, I'm going to go check her out too, because I don't think I've ever heard of her, which is not often, but I will gladly check that out. Before we let you go, will you please let everyone here know what you're working on, what they can go pick up with your name on it, because you are killing it right now. And I'm only anticipating to see your name blow up. And so I'm so fortunate to have had this opportunity to interview you. What are you working on?
Well, thank you. Right now, I've got a new series from Ahoy that's midstream called My Bad, which I'm co-writing with a friend of mine named Bryce Ingman. Art by Peter Krause.
I love Peter Krause. That is, I want to pick up that title.
He's somebody that I would gladly do a crime book with, because I think his style works very well for that.
Oh yeah.
But it's kind of a story about a big misunderstanding between a hero and a villain. It's told in two parts. I'm telling the hero half, and my friend Bryce is writing the villain part.
That's awesome.
And it's kind of like about them, like they meet in the last issue. But the premise for mine is that the villain sends this billionaire vigilante, like a salad shooter, as like a birthday present to the billionaire. So the billionaire's freaked out, thinking, well, he must know that I'm the superhero, because he sent it to my real address. And so it's about him obsessing over the fact that he got the salad shooter from this villain, and then like finally, confronting him. But that's with Ahoy.
That's awesome.
And also I've got Batman Urban Legends number 11, which
I am so excited for that. Oh my goodness. I'm so excited. It looks so good. Has that issue come out already?
No, it comes out on the 11th, I think.
Okay. So next week. Next week. And who's the artist on that?
That's Carl Mostert.
Is it only issue number 11, or is it an arc?
It's an arc, 11 through 16.
And you're bringing in, you already showed an image of it. You're bringing in Ace the Bat Hound again. I'm so
Ace
excited.
is in it, and it kind of tells a story half between Batman and half between Ace and these animal friends that he makes along the way.
I absolutely love to hear that. Well, that is awesome. Thank you so much, Mark, for coming on the podcast. You're welcome back anytime.
Hey, my pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for your grace. And guys, please go pick up the titles we're talking about, everything else coming out. Go pick up. I think it shouldn't still be on the racks, but it may be Star Squadron. When does issue 2 come out? Has it already come out?
It came out today.
Okay, well, we're gonna go pick up Star Squadron number 2. Really, really, really excited to read it. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Have a great one.
Thanks. You too. Thanks for having me.